This is a demonstration of a quick workflow in MaximEyes EHR. Before we begin, let's take a look at some of the key differentiators of MaximEyes EHR from other EHRs. It has highly customizable exam templates, so you can fit your workflow to your exam type, a long list of equipment integrations, bidirectional e-prescribing, so you can actually pull medications from the National Database SureScripts and download them into your system for each patient, an integrated patient portal, and an integrated image management system. The image management system can actually be accessed from any web browser. Also, MaximEyes EHR has a rules manager called Code Complete that can go in and assess everything in the exam and suggest different diagnoses, documents, tasks, notifications or pop-ups, and CPT codes for you at the end of the encounter. On the face of the EHR, you can see that we have today's appointments, a few quick links, a task list, and some favorite websites. Under today's appointments, you can see all of your appointments scheduled for each provider, what they're coming in for, underneath the reason, and then the time that they are scheduled. A couple of things that allow you to access a patient's encounter quickly are either by clicking on their name to access that patient and creating a new encounter, or if you simply need to jump in and edit a previous encounter for that patient, this Edit to Last Encounter button will pull up the very last encounter in edit mode for you. So if there's something that you remembered you need to go back into for your first appointment of the day or a previous appointment in the day, you can click that Edit Last Encounter button and it will pull up the encounter in edit mode. All of MaximEyes EHR is focused on a click reduction feature to help you get to where you need to go as quick as possible. When I'm ready to start an encounter and I want to view my patient's information, I click on their name. It pulls up all of the patient demographics, and then over on the left-hand side, I have multiple options. I can click on View All Encounters, and it shows me a list of all of this patient's encounters. Notice that each encounter type can be named differently, and each corresponding exam form attached to that encounter type can also be different. This allows the user to create different encounter types based on the actual appointment reason and attach an exam form that reflects that workflow for that appointment reason. Also, you're able to see what the patient actually came in for in the list of all of their encounters. For example, this patient was first seen for a new patient exam, came in for fundus photos, then an annual exam, then fundus photos, and you can see that we have different forms attached to each one. You can name these encounter types and exam forms and then customize these exam forms any way that you need to, and I'll jump into that in just a second. Before you actually see the patient, we have multiple ways to review their history, and then we obviously have multiple ways to review their history throughout the encounter. To start, you can click on the general flow sheet. This will compare each encounter date with side-by-side elements so you can compare the differences. You can expand or collapse any one of these sections. A more specific flow sheet is the glaucoma flow sheet. This will show you the goal IOP at the top, and then you see your PAC readings. You can also see encounter dates side by side and compare these encounter dates. For information such as ocular meds that does not fit in a small box, you can hover over it and it will pop out that SIG information for you. You can see every element that you might need to see and compare for glaucoma patients directly in this flow sheet. When you're ready to create an exam, you can click on New Encounter on the left-hand side, choose your customizable encounter type, and then click OK. This particular encounter form is set up in more of a landscape mode, meaning that we have very few pages to click across over here on the left-hand side, with multiple elements throughout so you can see more information on the screen. Keep in mind that this workflow can be customized to any workflow that you need. It's super simple to get in here and customize your own exam form. We do that for you normally during your SQL customization training, or we can assist you in customizing it with you. All you need to do is go to Office Admin, Encounter Admin, Encounter Manager, and then we can click on Set Up Encounter Forms. I'm just going to choose, let's say, this one here. Normally we'd make a copy of it and then change it, but I'm just going to show you how this works and click Edit. And we can move these encounter elements around anywhere that we need to customize your own workflow. We could also remove an encounter element entirely by right-clicking and removing it, or we can condense these pages by moving multiple features to the same page and then unselecting that page to show. Notice that we have multiple different encounter elements that you can choose from, all the way from exam to history elements. So we have a long list of elements. But if for some reason you do not see an encounter element that fits your exact need, we can customize these encounter elements. We can also create our own encounter elements from our spare elements. You can rename it to anything that you need, choose different drop-down lists, choose different field types, and then color code anything that you need to in here or rechange labels. From these spare elements, you can include normal buttons to pre-autofill your normal buttons for that particular element, as well as copy forward history to create any workflow that you need. We're going to use this encounter template as an example for today's workflow. First, let's talk about how to get in the information. There are multiple ways to get in information for the patient. The first is the medical history. We can either import this information from a welcome form and it populates this data in here, or if we are asking this patient while they're sitting here, we have easy set all to no buttons, and then you can click yes for any history or review of systems or eye diseases that you need. Or we have a history button located on each element. You can click on those history buttons. Use the Rolodex at the top to flip back through encounter dates until you find the encounter date that you need, and then copy it to the current encounter. There's an easy undo button. If I want to check the history for each individual element at a time, I can do this with the history buttons, or I have a copy from previous encounter button at the very top. If I click on this copy from previous encounter button, I have filter options to choose different encounter dates. Once I have that encounter date, I can hit select, and it automatically completes those history elements based on that encounter date. Moving on to our tech worksheet. Again, multiple different ways to get in information. It depends on how you prefer to enter in your data. One way for chief complaint is to simply type Another option is to copy forward from the history. You can again use the Rolodex, flip back through, find the encounter date that you need, and copy it to your current encounter. Or if you want to choose from a drop-down list, you can click on the data entry screen and be able to choose from any drop-down list and then hit add to add that in. Each one of these lists are customizable. During your SQL customization training, we strongly recommend that you put your top 20 HPIs at the top so you can quickly go through. If you do have a different HPI that's not in your top 20, you can simply start to type in and it will filter down that list for you. You never have to select everything from each drop-down list, and if there are things that you never select from or never choose, you can click on Edit List and you can remove those, or you can add any in, or change the order of them. And these Edit List button exists throughout every value list in the exam. Your medication history is also another key differentiator. You'll notice over here underneath the source information, we have a source of EHR and then a source of Arcopia Other. MaximEyes EHR has a bidirectional integration with Dr. First Arcopia, which uses the national database SureScripts to import any medications that the patients either had processed by insurance companies or have been electronically prescribed. You can simply launch the ePrescribe module, select a date range to download medications from. You can unselect any medications, and then when you log out, it dumps that list of medications into your medication history for you. So not only can you use the ePrescribe module to prescribe electronic prescriptions, check your drug and drug allergy interactions, but you can also dump in medications from that patient's history from any provider that has electronically prescribed a prescription or a prescription that has been processed by the insurance company. Jumping into prelims, again, multiple different ways to get an information. You can choose from a drop-down list. I can use my down arrow and my tab, or I can use a data entry screen, select from a drop-down list, notice the edit list on each one. I can equal the right eye over to the left eye, or I can simply copy from history. I can copy from my past prescription, or if I want to see the history of my encounter for previous spectacles, I can use the Rolodex to flip back through and copy. Again, we try to focus on click reduction, so everything in here tries to keep you from being redundant in your data entry. So let's say our previous spectacles is also what we want to put in for our refractions. Of course, we have import buttons that we can import in from our long list of integrated equipment, or I can simply copy this information forward to my refractions, and it populates it in here, and then of course I can make any changes that I need to. I could then create a prescription quickly for it by either copying it from my refractions or clicking the button Create an RX for, and it populates it in here. I can type in any note that I need, and you can customize your own drop-down list for notes, or you can simply type in. We also have the ability to set up normal buttons. Normal buttons are buttons that will fill out normal values in each element that has a normal button that will pre-populate normal data for that particular element. These are customizable, but we do have seed data in here for you to begin with to get an idea of what the normal values are in there from some of our other users. You have the ability to do a form normal. This global form normal button, when clicked, will replace all of the normals and those elements. This is one that you want to click before proceeding into completing any of these elements in the encounter. But that global normal button can be used to pre-populate information for that particular exam form. For example, if you have an exam form that you have normal values that you always put in for that workflow, then you can click the global normal at the beginning and it fills out that information for you. And then you can simply change anything as you go along. Some information you want in without ever having to click inside of the field at all. For example, on our tonometry reading, we already have our method as NCT because that is the method that we generally use. This is called initial data, where we don't have to click any buttons to get that information in there. It's already in there for us, and then of course we can change it any way that we need to. I'm going to fill out some of our information in here so you can see how our rules engine at the end takes the information from each field in our encounter data and suggests different documents, diagnoses, tasks, CPT codes, notifications, pop-ups, alerts for us as we get to the end to really automate the whole system. I'm going to use my normal button here. I can start to type in something and it will filter down that list, or I can choose from the drop-down list, copy forward from history, or choose from my data entry screen depending on how I prefer to get in the information. On my tonometry reading, if I want to compare past tonometry readings, again we have history buttons on each individual element. I can click on the history button and I can see side by side each of these readings. If I want to copy this reading over from a previous encounter date, I can click on copy forward and it copies that information in for me. This makes it really easy to do also auxiliary tests. So if we need to repeat a test, again, we can click on the history button, choose the test that we want to repeat, copy it forward. Then all we have to do is click Edit, mark our initials for today, mark when it was completed, and change any findings that we have. I can copy over findings for the entire right eye to the entire left eye by hitting the equals button, or I can just copy over the column by clicking on the column heading, or I can type in there. Again, all of these lists are customizable. Also, my findings can be pushed to my plans by clicking the Push to Plans button. That way I do not have to re-enter in any of these clinical findings in my plan screen. And then I've repeated a test. Now jumping down into my final findings, we'll see that my plans are listed here underneath Plans, and this is where the whole system starts to automate. So before we jump into how all of these interpretations come in from our Rules Manager, let's take a look at the History button again for final diagnoses. So again, I can hit History to see all of my final diagnoses compared side by side between multiple doctors. I've got the encounter date, the provider, diagnoses and procedures, assessments and plans. I can either copy over the entire encounter, so all diagnoses, procedures, assessments, and plans, or I can copy over just the diagnoses and procedures, or just the assessments and plans. As you hover over each one of these buttons, they indicate what it will do. I'm not going to copy anything over because I want to show you our rules engine, so instead I'm going to open up our data entry screen. From our data entry screen, we have all past diagnoses. If we were to click on any one of these diagnoses, it would add it into our final diagnoses at the bottom. As I scroll down, you'll see our rules engine is suggesting multiple codes for us based on findings that it has within the system. So for example, I've got blepharitis. I'm going to click on blepharitis and it adds it in for me. And then I also have, let's say, posterior vitreous body because I put in my PVD in my vitreous section of the posterior seg. My open angle glaucoma because of my tonometry readings being so high. So hopefully you never have to go in and search for any codes. You can simply either click on them, or we have the ability with this rules engine to customize it so these codes automatically add in here. So you can either choose to select from the suggested code and just have the rules engine suggest these codes for you, then have to click on them to add them to your final diagnoses, or you can have them automatically added into your final diagnoses based on those rules, and you can do that differently for different types of codes. So you can have one diagnosis auto-added, and then the other diagnosis simply pop up a suggestion in here. If you do ever need to search for a code, which hopefully you don't, we do have a smart tool at the very top. You can type in any abbreviation. You can type in ICD-9 description, ICD-10 description, ICD-9 code, ICD-10 code, any pieces, and it will filter through the ICD-10 and ICD-9 codes. We're in ICD-10 mode now, and sort anything ophthalmic related towards the top. Now let's say we want to pick cornea abrasion. This is not one that we should be picking due to our specificity not being listed in here, so let's see what it does. I'm just going to pick general cornea abrasion. It stops me and highlights it in blue and says I really need to pick the laterality and the encounter type for these modifiers. Then it will add it in and recode it, and importing any placeholders that it needs and coding it the correct description for ICD-10. As I move on to my assessments and plans, I do have multiple assessments and plans that are associated with select diagnoses. I can select multiple ones and add them in at once, or I can simply type in. Same concept with plans. I can have plans associated with each diagnosis code, or I can select all of my diagnoses and see all of my plans in here. These are completely customizable. Or I could type in the bottom. If I need to schedule a patient or refer a patient out or recall a patient, I can select. Say I want to schedule for Kathy cataracts for 2 weeks, and it adds in that referral for me. Jump to final procedures in the same concept. I either have code complete rules, which automatically suggest for me. So my fundus photos, for example, is suggested for me based on the fundus photos and auxiliary testing that I completed. I can select it to push it down. Normally, I would set that up as a rule that automatically added for me. Of course, if I had marked completed on a fundus photo, that means I had completed it. I don't want to have to click the suggestion. I would set up that rule to automatically add for me down here. I also have the ability to choose from bundles. So bundles allow you to pick multiple different procedure codes bundled together for your most common exams. And it adds in all of those bundles, including any modifiers and diagnosis pointers for you. Also, we have the ability to have final procedures automatically attached to each encounter form. And then we also have the ability to launch an E&M code checker to automatically suggest any upgrades procedure codes that we have. Our E&M code checker will suggest different findings we'll put in our medical decision making. And it will suggest a 99 code to upcode to. Or if we want to see what it would take to upcode to a specific code, we could do E&M code lookup, find the code we want to upcode to and show the criteria. And it shows us from the data that we have in the exam what's required, what we provided, and what we want to focus on is what is missing in this missing column. I'm going to accept the 99 code suggested, and it will enter it in here for the procedures. Again, these procedures could be auto-populated from those code complete rules, or you can select the bundle from here, or those procedures would automatically be in here based on the encounter type. Notice the automation from the outbound documents. Based on each one of our diagnoses and procedures in here, it's automatically filled out outbound documents. I've got my INR report from my fundus photos, my referral letter, education material about vitreous detachment and blepharitis. And all of these can be set up to go to certain recipients. So I can see I've got Greg glaucoma, my referred to, and then we can also set them up to go specific ways. So all of this is customizable, so it's already in here. If it needs reviewed, I do have to mark it as reviewed, so that is an option if you don't want it to send automatically. But when you're ready for everything to go, you can simply click on Sign, and it will send all those documents off automatically for you. Now, when I sign off, it did send all of these for me. If it does have a failing, so let's say if that direct secure email is incorrect, it will show me the fail, and then I can resend it directly from the edit button. But also the signature has multiple system preferences that help you out with incentive programs. We have multiple system preferences that automatically meet any measures for incentive programs. And at the end of the encounter, we can see which measures in the incentive programs we've met or which ones we haven't through our encounter indicator. So from my data entry screen, I can either review the incentive programs measures need to be met from this screen by clicking on incentive programs, or I can come back and view this list as an entire list of all of my encounters for a time. I can see the ECQM measure or my quality measure for closing the referral loop has not been met because my status indicator is red. For each of these measures, if I have not met that measure, it will show red in here, and then I can simply click the edit button. And to show you in here, I'm just going to show a couple that may not have actually triggered for this patient. And when I click that edit button, it shows me in red what I need to put in to complete this measure. It only shows lists available for that particular measure. And then I can add it in. Oh, I do need my problem source and status. And then I can add it in and meet that measure. So an easy way to check how you're doing, we also have today's encounters that show you red or green buttons on how you're doing for the today's encounters as a whole, or like I said, reporting periods. Another option that we have as an add-on for our imaging section is our image history that we can view in our image management. So our iClinic imaging. That is our demonstration of MaximEyes EHR. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.